The gunshot echoed across the dark stone walls of Windermere long before anyone screamed. Marco Rios felt it before he understood it, the sharp, brutal impact tearing through his chest, stealing the air from his lungs. His body staggered backward, shock flashing across his face as he stared at the man holding the weapon. His father, Jenz Sidwell, didn't blink. Not once. Marco's back hit the cold marble column behind him. His hand trembled as he looked down at the spreading red stain soaking through his shirt. The betrayal wasn't subtle, it wasn't misunderstood, it was deliberate. "Why, you said," Marco coughed, blood touching his lips, "you said family was everything." Sidwell's expression remained carved from stone. "Family," he replied evenly, lowering the gun just slightly, "does not betray me." Outside in the corridor, footsteps pounded closer. Lucas Jones. He had heard the shot. He had known something like this was coming. And he was too late. Only hours earlier, tension had been simmering beneath every surface in Port Charles. Marco had known he was playing a dangerous game. Protecting Lucas meant lying to his father, and lying to Jenz Sidwell was a death wish. Lucas had overheard just enough of Sidwell's private conversation about Cesar Faison's final project to understand the scope of what was being planned. It wasn't theoretical research, it wasn't harmless experimentation, it was weaponized, calculated, designed to destabilize. And Lucas had been spotted. Pascal had seen him listening outside the study door. The man hadn't confronted Lucas directly, instead he had done something worse. He had gone straight to Sidwell. Marco had sensed the shift in the air almost immediately after that. Sidwell wasn't a fool. During their tense exchange earlier that week, he had pushed back when Marco suggested Lucas move out of Windermere. The suggestion had seemed protective on the surface. But to Sidwell it reeked of concealment. "Why would Lucas need to leave?" Sidwell had asked calmly, watching his son with razor-sharp precision. "Is there something he knows that I do?" Marco had denied it. Too quickly. And Sidwell had noticed. Now back in the present, Lucas burst through the heavy wooden doors of the study. "Marco!" His world stopped. Marco was slumped against the column, sliding down slowly, blood pooling beneath him. Sidwell stood just a few feet away, gun still warm in his hand. Lucas's medical instincts fought with his horror. "Call 911, Lucas shouted, rushing forward, dropping to his knees, his hands pressed desperately against the wound. "Stay with me, stay with me." Marco's eyes searched Lucas's face, filled with apology. "I tried," Marco whispered weakly. "I tried to keep you out of it." Lucas's jaw tightened. "You're going to be fine, do you hear me? You're going to be fine." Sidwell watched the scene with unsettling calm. "He knew too much," Sidwell said coldly. Lucas looked up, fury igniting inside him. "He's your son." "He was careless," Sidwell corrected. "Carelessness is fatal." Lucas understood then. This wasn't a warning shot. This wasn't intimidation. Sidwell had decided Marco was expendable. And if Marco was expendable, so was Lucas. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance. Sidwell's eyes flickered toward the sound, then back to Lucas. "You were never meant to survive this, Dr. Jones," Sidwell said quietly. Lucas felt the threat settle into his bones. Marco's breathing grew shallow, his grip on Lucas's wrist tightened, then weakened. "Lucas," Marco exhaled, voice barely audible, "don't trust." The words never finished. His body went still. Lucas froze. "No," he whispered. But there was no pulse. No breaths. No miracles. Marco Rios was gone. Port Charles would feel this. Lucas's scream echoed through Windermere as paramedics finally rushed inside, pushing past Sidwell, who stepped aside with disturbing composure. He didn't run. He didn't panic. He didn't explain. Because in his mind he had simply removed a liability. And now he would remove the next ones. Lucas! At the hospital later that night, word spread fast. Felicia Scorpio stood outside the trauma room, eyes wide with disbelief. Maxie Jones gripped her mother's hand. "What happened?" Maxie demanded. Lucas couldn't answer. He sat in a chair in the hallway, shirt stained with Marco's blood, hands trembling. Anna Devane arrived minutes later, her expression already hardened with suspicion. When her eyes landed on Lucas, she knew this wasn't random violence. "This was Sidwell," she said quietly. Lucas looked up slowly. "He shot his own son," Lucas replied, voice hollow. Even Anna, who had seen the worst of men, felt the weight of that. If Sidwell could kill his own flesh and blood, there were no limits. Meanwhile, at Windermere, Sidwell stood alone in the dim study. He poured himself a drink. Marco's betrayal had forced his hand. The boy had grown sentimental, weak, influenced by Lucas. Sidwell couldn't allow weakness near Cesar Faison's final project. He had come too far. Faison had entrusted him with the culmination of years of calculated chaos, a blueprint designed not just to hurt individuals, but to fracture systems. Governments, hospitals, infrastructure. Port Charles was merely a testing ground. Marco had stumbled onto enough pieces to become a risk. Lucas had stumbled onto even more. Sidwell picked up his phone. "Accelerate the timeline," he instructed calmly. "We proceed without delay." On the other end, silence, then agreement. The final phase would begin sooner than planned. And Lucas Jones would not interfere. Back at General Hospital, Lucas stood beside Marco's covered body in the morgue. Tears streamed silently down his face. He replayed every warning Marco had tried to give him, every hesitation, every protective lie. Marco had died trying to shield him, and Sidwell had done it without hesitation. Lucas felt grief twist into something sharper. Resolve. He wasn't running. He wasn't hiding. If Sidwell thought eliminating Marco would silence the threat, he was wrong. Lucas knew enough, and he would expose everything, even if it cost him his own life. But Sidwell was already steps ahead. Later that night, as Lucas left the hospital, he didn't notice the car idling across the street. Didn't notice the man inside speaking quietly into a burner phone. "He's leaving now." Sidwell had lost a son, but he had not lost control. And Lucas was next. The next morning, Port Charles woke to shock. News of Marco Rios' death spread like wildfire. Jocelyn Jacks read the alert on her phone at Kelly's and nearly dropped her coffee. "Sidwell's son," she whispered in disbelief. Trina Robinson stared across the table. "You think his father had something to do with it?" Jocelyn didn't answer, but her silence said enough. Across town, Anna Devane met with Jordan Ashford behind closed doors. "He shot Professor Henry Dalton in cold blood when Dalton betrayed him," Anna reminded her quietly. "This fits the pattern." Jordan nodded grimly. "But killing your own sons?" Anna's jaw tightened. "That's what makes him more dangerous than we thought." Lucas, meanwhile, refused police protection. "I'm not hiding," he told Anna firmly. "You're a target," she shot back. "I was already a target," Lucas replied. "Marco died because of me." "That's not true," Anna said, though she wasn't entirely certain. Lucas stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Sidwell is finishing something Faison started. I heard enough to know it's bigger than any of us." Anna's eyes darkened. Cesar Faison's legacy had haunted Port Charles for decades. If Sidwell truly intended to complete Faison's final project, they were running out of times. That evening, Lucas received a message. "Unknown numbers. Meet me at Pier 54, come alone, if you want the truth about Faison's project." Lucas knew it was a trap. He went anyway. The docks were quiet, mist curling over the water, footsteps echoed behind him. He turned slowly. Sidwell stepped into the dim light. "You're persistent," Sidwell observed. "You murdered your son," Lucas said flatly. Sidwell's expression didn't flicker. He chose sentiment over strategy. "You chose power over blood." Sidwell tilted his head. "Power endures, blood weakens." Lucas felt anger surge. "What was the project? What are you planning?" Sidwell studied him carefully. "For a doctor, you're remarkably brave," Sidwell said, "or remarkably foolish." Behind Lucas' movement, he sensed it too late. A figure lunged, but before the blow could land, a gunshot rang out. Not Sidwell. Jason Morgan stepped from the shadows, weapon raised. "Step away from him," Jason ordered coldly. Sidwell's eyes narrowed. For the first time since Marco's death, there was tension. Anna and Jordan emerged seconds later, officers surrounding the pier. Sidwell calculated the odds instantly. Retreat was smarter than martyrdom. He gave Lucas one final look. This isn't over. Then he surrendered for now. Days later, Sidwell sat in a holding cell, smiling faintly. Because while Port Charles believed they had stopped him, the final phase of Faison's project had already begun. Elsewhere in the city, systems flickered. Hospitals experienced unexplained network breaches. Financial records glitched. The first ripple of something catastrophic. Marco Rios was dead. But his death had not ended the threat. It had accelerated it. Lucas stood at Marco's graveside, grief heavy in his chest. He had lost the man he loved and gained a war